Good evening. Welcome to the October 13, 2016 meeting of the Monomoy Regional School Committee. We call the meeting to order at 6:37. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of September 22nd, 2016. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Ryder?
Concerning the vote on the high school handbook, I had said for the record why I was objecting, and it somehow did not get into the minutes. So that should be added in.
I think you have notes on her statement of objection.
She had said that she stated publicly she would not be voting for it, but I didn't put it in because her nay vote indicates that. But I'd be happy to put that in.
It's my understanding that according to Robert's rules, when for the record is stated, that it needs to be transcribed verbatim into the minutes.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So would that change? Any further discussion regarding changes or additions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to address the school committee? This is the time. Come on up here.
Thank you very much for listening to me. My name is John Malone, resident here in Harwich, and I have been kind of in charge of the construction project at the, I like to call it the bathroom facility. It's been referred to as a concession stand for far too long, because that is 1/10 of what the building is about. But that facility is at a crucial point. We've run out of funds, and we need to get a roof on that, sidewall on that, doors and windows so that it can be tight to the weather as we go through the fundraising process to fill the interior of the building. So I'm here to find out who do we attack? How do we get more money to be able to continue to move forward on this project?
Do you have a suggestion?
I have a suggestion, yeah. No, we're stumped. You know, I know my suggestion is I have a great labor force ready to roll. We have to find some money so that we can get this thing done in the next, I would say 60 days, or else the weather is just in a position where we're not going to be any good. So, do I have a suggestion? Yeah, there's all kinds of little fundraising band-aids that seem to be suggested. Every group that I go in front of and every person that I speak with, we come up with the same series of things. And those would all be well and good if we had a year of fundraising to put together to get one big lump sum. But we don't have that opportunity here. I'm asking you to help me find if there's money in a building budget somewhere that can help us move forward now, and even pay it back once the fundraising has moved forward. Please.
Mr. Duval.
What dollar amount are we speaking?
You know, we're not even
Just to-
considering finishing the project, just to get us tight to the weather. I would imagine anywhere between $20,000 and $22,000 is doors, windows, roof, sidewall, locks and fasteners, so the whole thing can be closed up tight till we move forward on it. You know, we're trying to match exactly the shingles that are on the building here, and those are inordinately expensive. We could get something relatively close and save ourselves some money if we are not bound by that exact match routine. We've got a labor force that is just off the charts. People are coming out of the woodwork, and I mean qualified, insured, licensed professionals that just want to jump on this thing and get it done. And it's getting hard for me to keep putting them off. It's been 4 weekends in a row now where I said, no money, I don't know. No money, I don't know. And that enthusiasm is going to diminish if I don't move forward pretty quick.
Ms. Ryder.
So are you saying you need money for materials, but you have the labor force?
Absolutely.
Clarify.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It's you would not believe how many people are willing to work on this. But nobody can do anything without a nail. We gotta buy this stuff.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Ms. Urat-Long?
Oh, now I understand. This as long as fine. The labor is donated, volunteer,
All donated.
all donated volunteer.
All
Is
donated.
anybody out of any of those contractors are they willing to donate materials until said fundraising can accomplish
I
those
haven't
financial goals?
I haven't asked anybody to give me any money. I haven't done it. And none of these are big companies. These are all little guys that are all just, you know,
And I understand that labor in itself is
Right, we're
very
talking about,
valuable.
The district's gonna have an asset worth $350,000 plus when this is done. This is not like, this is money put after something that's not gonna be very useful for the next 50 years. So, it's become cumbersome for me to continue to ask these guys to be on hold, especially with how close we are to at least being able to get it tight to the weather. Plumbers are even, we have the place rough plumbed too, and these are industrial bathrooms. It's an inordinate amount of money it costs to do industrial bathrooms, but it's required because of the seating capacity of the field, the proximity to the playing surface. The bathrooms within the school do not meet the criteria that the state of Massachusetts puts out there. So my hands are tied. We got to move, and I'm looking for you guys to help me figure out how to do that. When we lost the AD, that slowed us down, but the booster club is getting rolling. Okay, we had a really productive meeting last night. The fundraising will happen, but it cannot happen quick enough. And that's what I'm looking for, someone to step up and find us some money somewhere, and I know everybody says that to you, with a commitment from this booster committee that we will repay it as the funds are raised. I see us fundraising $150,000, but that's wishful thinking, and it certainly didn't happen and won't happen overnight.
Anybody else? Mr. Malone, because the question of paying for the concession stand / bathroom is not on our agenda for tonight, we're very much welcoming you to give us your comments.
Great.
But in order for us to have a discussion about it, we would have to put it on the agenda.
Stunning. I got you. Yep.
So if we decide to do that, I would invite you to come back with people.
I would be happy to.
We'll make sure that we let you know.
What's the time frame on that? When would that become something I would have to make sure I had people motivated to be here and so on?
Probably as early as, Mr. Carpenter.
I was going to say that between now and our next school committee meeting, there will also be a building committee meeting next week that I suspect that Mr. Malone will show up at in public comment as well. And I suspect that we'd have a report back from the building committee meeting
In time for our next meeting?
related to this as well.
For our next.
For our next meeting, so I see no reason why we couldn't.
So this is a preliminary step. I'm glad we made it. And I thank you all for listening. It's going to be a great asset. It's been a great community, little effort. Everybody has been at it. It's been delightful. And I want it to stay that way, especially for the guys that have put the time in. Thanks, girls.
So that'll be on our October 27th agenda.
Okay, I'm putting that down right now. And I will go and speak with that, the building committee, just to get the bug in their ear as well, so that we're moving forward on that.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else who's here to address the school committee? Okay, hearing none. Next item is recognitions. Mr. Carpenter?
Just a related note. First, I actually can't thank John enough for his tenacity. I think we saw a lot of it this evening, but his tenacity also in lining up the labor force that got the concession stand / bathroom facility to the state that it's in. And I do understand the urgency there to at least make sure that it's sealed tight to the weather as we go into a very mild New England winter. Related to the Boosters Club that would be sort of operating the concession stand to help support our athletic program. Last night they had a meeting, and we had a number of individuals stepped up to volunteer to be officers in this organization to kind of help it get off the ground. So I want to thank Simon Evans for volunteering to be the president. For co-vice presidents, we have Kelma Deaver and Missy Carpenter, treasurer Wendy Nickerson, and co-secretaries Nicole Munoz and Julie Santoni. So thank you for your volunteering to be part of this. I also just want to put a very sincere gratitude out there to Cape Cod 5, who today took part in an activity here at the high school for Credit for Life. So every one of our seniors participated in this. And in schools, I think we oftentimes are really good at teaching students how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, do fractions, and for some that head off to calculus, learn differential equations and this and that. But do we really prepare them for the math that they need to, to really succeed in life and not come out of college buried in credit card debt or student loans, or to sort of understand what does it take in life to to be happy and not swamped financially. So it's very interesting to come see a Credit for Life fair and the support of Cape Cod 5 Bank. I walked in expecting I might see a couple people from Cape Cod 5. I think you could have run 5 branch offices with the support that came from from their organization today. We had over 60 volunteers, many of whom were from Cape Cod 5, but also a number of volunteers from our own community that were part of this endeavor. Every one of the seniors participated. It was a great experience. The seniors came in dressed suits, ties, business attire, dressed to impress, so to speak, and a great showing all around. And I thank all the volunteers that were part of that, including the daughter-in-law of Mr. Russell.
That is true, yes.
I'd like to take this opportunity during the recognitions to, as chair of the school committee, to appoint Terry Russell as our representative to the Cape Cod Collaborative, for the record, and also to thank him and recognize him for being the only one who didn't step backwards when it was time to step forward. So, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is reports and discussions. The first item is the MCAS and Park presentation. Dr. Blanchard.
So I know that you were sent some preliminary graphs and information in an email last week, so I'm here to give some context to that information, and there's an updated PowerPoint in your packets that has this PowerPoint that you're going to see tonight. So this is the English Language Arts Park data for 2016 in grades 3 through 8. And what we see here is that less than 50% of students in grades 3 and 4 met expectations at grade level on this assessment. You'll hear me throughout the night talk about percentages, and those percentages I usually group with the exceeded expectations and met expectations, so that's really what we're looking at here. This graph is a comparison of last year's ELA Park data and this year's, and just to show you by grade level, you have I've combined the met and exceeded expectations in that first column, the difference between the 2 years and just those students who met the expectations, and then the last column is the combination of met and exceeded expectations. And as you'll see, students really don't start to make progress toward meeting and exceeding expectations until after the 5th grade for now. This graph is for the Mathematics Park 2016 data, and with the exception of grade 6, no grade level met or exceeded expectations in mathematics. We hope that as Math in Focus starts to be implemented this year, we will see this change. I would like to address that 6th grade result as an example of best practice and effective use of data to drive instruction. We had a 6th grade teacher who looked at her incoming students in September, identified those on her team who needed some additional supports, and with the collaboration of her team, she arranged to see approximately 15 students during the literacy block for 20 minutes every day, all year long last year. And this is a result of her team. The simplicity of that act and that intervention and the effectiveness, I think, is something that can't be overlooked. And I applaud her and Mr. Wilson for supporting her and using that time in that way, and her team members, because they all collaborated and helped out. So this is the comparison again from 2015-16, and I think it's important to remember that as we compare 15 and 16, we're not comparing the same grade 3 with this year's grade 3. That's kind of obvious, but I think it's important because you'll see some cohort data coming up. And you see that bump in 6th grade. You'll also notice a bump in 8th grade, but that is largely due to the fact that only 19% of students in last year's 8th grade met expectations and no one exceeded. So that's why that data's, those numbers are high in the difference. So we have some work to do. The next series of graphs will show you the cohort data. So we're actually comparing apples to apples here. So this is our current 5th grade and how they did in 3rd grade and then moving to 4th grade. So we start to identify patterns of student performance in different ways. And so as you see here, the English language arts actually decreased by 6 percentage points from 3rd grade to 4th grade because as you see the exceeded expectations bar was a little bit lower in the 3rd grade, but the met expectations bar was lower in the 4th grade. And then this cohort for mathematics was pretty flat from 3rd grade to 4th grade. They did decrease by 1 percentage point. And again, I'm referring to the combination of met and exceeded expectations when I talk about these percentage points. So here's our current 6th grade, and for the English language arts, they decreased by 1 percentage point from 4th to 5th grade, and they increased by 7 percentage points from 4th to 5th grade in mathematics. Cohort data for our current grade 7. The English language arts increased by 3 percentage points from 5th grade to 6th grade for met and exceeding. And the mathematics increased by 20 percentage points for 6th grade, from 5th grade to 6th grade for met and exceeded. And that's that cohort that I spoke about earlier. And our current 8th grade, the English language arts increased by 5 percentage points and mathematics by 4 percentage points. I'm sorry, mathematics decreased by 4 percentage points from 6 to 7. And finally, our current 9th grade, the English language arts, they increased their performance by 3 percentage points, and they decreased their performance in mathematics by 3 percentage points. So this graph is represents student growth percentile, median student growth percentile. And student growth percentile is different from the park level performance because it shows progress, not achievement. So the best way to think about this is when you take a child to the doctor and they measure that child's height and they say that they are in the 95th percentile, which means that they're taller than 95% of the children at their age. So this compares academic peers. So we would look at students in grade 4 English language arts that performed in the same performance level in 3rd grade, and now they're being compared against their cohorts that performed in that same performance level around the state. So it's comparing academic peers. So as you see, our growth percentile, you want to be, the state median is 50. And so you want to be at 50 and above. And as you see, we are not meeting that benchmark, with the exception of that little bump in 6th grade. And as you can imagine, if we start to get as low as we're getting in the English language arts, it takes a lot of intervention to get those students up to where they need to be. So we want to change this and turn this around. Anything above 60 is considered high growth, and anything above 70 is considered very high growth. So this compares growth percentile with some of our neighboring districts. And the very dark line is Falmouth. The red line, that's the little teepee, is Lighthouse, because it's just the 6th through 8th grade. Monomoy is the lighter blue, that's below in that pink box. And Nauset is a combination of Orleans Elementary School for 4th and 5th grade, and then Nauset Middle School for 6th, 7th, and 8th. And of these 4 schools, Falmouth and Monomoy took the park in these grades, and Nauset and Lighthouse took MCAS for these grades. So again, we'd like to be up in that 50% and above for growth, but interestingly, both Falmouth and Monomoy had a dip in grade 7 for ELA in their growth. And this is the same growth percentile and comparative for math for students in those same districts. So for 10th grade MCAS 2016, we have 93% of students were proficient or advanced in English language arts. 81% were proficient or advanced in mathematics, and 82% were proficient or advanced in science. In this case, it was the biology test. And this is a comparison from last year's MCAS data for grade 10. And we have a difference of just advanced in that second to last column, and then advanced and proficient together. And again, these are different students because of different years. So we did the same cohort comparison from 8th grade to 10th grade, and as you see, there's quite a jump. This is our current grade 11 MCAS results, so they jumped 22 percentage points from 8th grade to 10th grade in English language arts, 42 percentage points from 8th grade to 10th grade in mathematics, and 36 percentage points from 8th grade to 10th grade in science. Again, that's combining proficient and advanced. And here's our current seniors. They jumped 15 percentage points in English language arts from 8th grade to 10th grade, 30 percentage points in mathematics, and 38 percentage points in science. This is a comparative student growth percentile by district. And as you see, Monomoy has very high growth in English language arts and mathematics, and they have a long way to grow in comparison to some of the other districts. And obviously, because this is 10th grade, all of these districts took the MCAS. And here's a comparison of advanced and proficient scores for English language arts, mathematics, and science for the districts Sturgis, Nauset, Falmouth, and Monomoy. So as you see where the growth percentile is high for Monomoy, we come in lower than our other districts. So this is a continuation of that first student growth percentile graph, and it includes grade 10. So as you see, the students do jump from below or a low growth percentile to a high growth percentile. And what we would like to move toward is to have our students in the grades 4 to 8 be in that higher growth percentile so that they can jump even higher in 10th grade. We don't want to have to push them that much farther in those 2 years. So to summarize the Park and MCAS 2016 data, more than half of our students met or exceeded grade level expectations beginning in grade 5, and 93% of students in grade 10 met or exceeded grade level expectations, 55 of those scoring in the advanced. For mathematics, with the exception of that grade 6 cohort, more than half of students are not meeting grade level expectations through grade 8 for mathematics, and 81% of grade 10 meet or exceed grade level expectations, 53 scoring in the advanced. So again, it's that big leap, and if we can get them closer, we can get them even higher. Then the summary of that cohort data, those data that showed the students, our current 5th grade and their movement, again, beginning in grade 8, each cohort shows a steady increase on the performance of English language arts. And with the exception of that grade 6 data last year, we have more than half of each cohort through grade 8 not meeting grade level expectations in mathematics. And our grade 10 percentage of students perform at proficient or advanced in ELA, math, and science at the respective rates of 93, 74, and 82, at or above. That's looking at that cohort over time. So, what are we doing about it? We have in place this year, and some of it started last year. Obviously, you're aware of our new Math and Focus program. We have provided professional development both in June and September, and we're very excited about having our November 8th Professional Development Day, because the trainers come back, and they come back at grade level. So there are 8 trainers that will come and meet with each grade level. Professional development is very well done with this program. In addition, last night we had a parent university. We had 41 parents who attended a parent training for Math and Focus, and it was not unlike the training that Mrs. Hemian did with all of you last year on the bar modeling, and it was very interactive, and the young gentleman that came to train the parents took them through a series of steps that their own children are experiencing in the classroom, and it was fun. The engagement, the level of energy, and excitement was palpable, so that was a very enjoyable evening. We continue with our professional development and our reading instruction. We are going to be looking at some of our resources this year. Some of the data that's coming up is showing us that we need to do a little bit of action research. You'll see that on the next slide. We have in place our struggling learners. We have supports for struggling learners in the high school. We have that academic support center. And our goal is to make sure that that stays fluid, that students don't come and stay, that they come and they get their intervention and their supports, and then they leave. And we have also implemented our baseline and benchmark tool that you all approved last year, the MAP tool, the measure of academic progress. And we're using that to develop data for our professional learning community teams. So that's what's in place. It started last year, and some of it started last year, but it has been put in place this year and is on its way. And as you see, all of these things are aligned in our strategic plan. Some action steps that we're putting in process now, in part as a result of the first 2 months of school, and also as a result of our continued strategic initiatives. We want to really leverage this MAP suite of tools. We have a training on Wednesday. We're going to be training approximately 40 staff members, mostly our teacher leaders, in how to read the reports of this assessment tool. The window of testing closes tomorrow, so we had to wait until that window closed so that we could generate our reports. The amount of data is massive, and so we're just going to kind of learn what we can use now and going forward. And one of the things that the data does in MAP is it actually predicts how students will perform on state assessments. So you can actually look now at a 4th grader and know if they took the test, where would they fall? And that's very powerful at this stage in the game. Remember going back to that very simple intervention done in 6th grade and the results. We also, Mr. Carpenter and I have been looking at calibrating grading, and I know Mr. Wilson started with that with his staff the first day of school in September, but to work on having teachers have conversations about is an A the same as an exceed expectations? And so are we actually calibrating our local assessments with what the state expectations are? And that'll be a very rich and interesting professional conversation as the year goes on. I did mention the action research. We want to, looking at our 3rd and 4th grade data, we really want to take a deeper look at the resources that we're using, and we have an opportunity to compare resources that are being used in one of our elementary schools against the other and kind of do a little bit of an action research there. And then this week, we have an administrative data team that is getting together to support building-based data teams, so that as this huge amount of information gets gathered, we can have a way to sort it and present it, and the professional learning community teams can kind of hit the ground running instead of having to figure out what they're looking at. So we're putting a lot of training and support in place and gathering a lot of information to try to support students early and often and see some better results. So our teacher leadership teams, our educational councils, which are our instructional leaders at the elementary levels and our department heads at the middle and high levels, meet once a month, and after a very quick look at some of these data, they started generating some questions about what else would they like to learn from what the data is saying. And so these are some of the questions. They want to know how students are performing in the early grades on ELA and math, because we don't really see any of this until 3rd grade. Again, the new assessment tool, the MAP, the benchmark tool, will give us that information, so we'll be able to start to see how those students are doing early on. As I mentioned, we want to look at what additional supports can we provide in grades 3 and 4, where we're just seeing kind of this flat, no growth. How can we expand on the model of the grade 6 intervention? In other words, how can we take that best practice and move it out into other areas, and particularly the challenge is how do we find the time throughout the day, and how do we move the children around, and I'm confident that we can do that. One of the secondary department heads asked the question, why is the English language arts growth so low in this particular cohort? So she wants to dig a little bit deeper in that data. And then the elementary teachers asked the question, how can we increase motivation and investment in learning? We had a nice discussion about including families and how can we involve everyone. They They question whether the grade 10 scores jump because there's an accountability, it's a high stakes, and they'd like to be able to move that mindset into their grades as well. So that's it for me, and I'll take your questions.
Ms. Richardson?
In your summary, you have addressed a number of things that I was concerned about when I first looked at the scores. But I'll start with the good news. I'm really pleased with the jump in the high school and the upper grades. It's significant growth, I think. And my question is, and it started out with what your statement was tonight, you said we don't seem to make progress until after 5th grade. But my question is, why can't that start in 3rd? But I think you're laying that out because it does need to start earlier from what, and I'm really bothered that we hover around only 50% meeting expectations.
Well, that's not our expectation, that's what we're seeing.
Yes.
Yes, we want to be above that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We should be.
And on these meetings and is that a plan, a definite plan, or how do you organize these next steps? I mean, how do you decide what grade level even that we're going to focus on? I'm just wondering.
Well, I think
Get it at the lower grades.
Right. If you go to the steps that are, what's being implemented now, that is all those grades. I mean, the reading instruction that started last year, that professional development is continuing, and we have a consultant that comes in and works with students and works with teachers in grades kindergarten through 4th. And so that's in place. The math training is in place. We have those dates, okay? The data teams, the PLCs are in place, all right? They meet every other Wednesday, so that's already in place, and they're being fed the information and the data. Is that answering your question?
Well, like you said, the teachers will be meeting, they identified questions that they felt that needed to be addressed.
Right.
How does that happen? How do they address them? I mean,
Well, they can come up with the questions.
Right.
How we're going to address them is to a lot of it'll start on Wednesday, next
Okay.
Wednesday, when we jump into these reports that we have been benchmarking students from about the 2nd week of school. And it's taken a long time because we have a lot of students that we have to get through this. But that information now, when it comes back to us on Wednesday, we will have our teacher leaders, our teams, come in and start to look at that data and create reports and generate information that they can then go back to their teams on their Wednesdays and sit down and look at that data and begin to group students based on what kind of interventions they need, and move forward in that way. So there is time and there's a process in place for that.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Stowe?
I'm just a little confused about I'm not that familiar with the PLC and the teacher leaders. So this Wednesday, you've got 40 teacher leaders that are meeting for doing some of this work. Are these all people that work in math, or are they other areas?
No, the district has set up in grades kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, excuse me, to grade 4, grade level teacher leaders. That's a position that teachers apply for, and they're appointed, and they are given a stipend. They lead the professional learning community time, which is every other Wednesday, and they also have curriculum learning time, that they meet in addition to that they do their grade level work. So at the 5th through 12th grade, those positions are called department heads, and they are content based. So you will have a math and an English at each level. All of those leaders, teacher leaders, have gone through a professional training. We had 2 evenings in September, and we worked with a consultant from Teachers 21 on supporting them in how they lead their peers. And that was tremendously successful, and our consultant is going to be coming back in January to touch base with them. But we've had very positive feedback from that training.
So each grade has one teacher leader, is that
In
right?
the elementary.
In elementary. And is it similar numbers or more numbers at the upper levels?
It's fewer because it's content-based.
So those teacher leaders go into the PLC time that the other teachers are in and teach them things?
Yes, I mean, it's their peers. They're, you know, one of the grade 1 teachers is a teacher leader. Okay?
That's helpful. So when we get this information back, is there a lot of item analysis done for finding out, not just to teach through the test, but for instance, I remember when we did other tests, we did some item analysis and found out, for instance, if kids knew time to the half hour. So I'm just wondering if this informs us, not just of how numerically we're doing, but particular areas we might be weak in.
The answer is yes, and the PARC data does not release the item analysis that MCAS did. It will when it becomes the new MCAS.
Okay.
But that's why having this other assessment tool, this benchmark tool,
Yes.
will drill us all the way down to the very nitty-gritty so that you can see this student needs to work on this before we can get them here.
Thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Dr. Blanchard. This, you know, you alluded to a metaphor about a child going to the pediatrician and having a physical. We've been very much aware of the math weaknesses, targeting, say, Howard for several years. All of this data, I think, will be invaluable. And what I'd be interested in as a committee, we've agreed to have this math focus as a goal for us to support and encourage and gain knowledge in the course of the year. I would think after the troops examine this, and as you said, dig a little bit deeper, periodically, if what I'd be interested in is some success stories as they begin, as you alluded to in the 6th grade, begin to set up a plan. So this is a baseline of last spring. So we analyze it, and then we begin to create some prevention and remediation. And so we've got a 3-year plan to see just how well we can begin to start this boost of growth and not wait for the 10th grade. The interesting dilemma, and Dada can say whatever you want it to say. Interesting, I noted, I could be wrong, that on the 4th grade level, there was, I don't know whether it's ELA or math, but there was Chatham 4th graders, they had a TP going this way, and Howard Elementary had the almost opposite growth, with less and more kids, but still the same bunch of kids, so that's interesting. Second thing, we've committed a math focus. In one of the schools I think we visited in the report as we committed financially to do this, I think was Falmouth. And our scores this past spring followed Falmouth, or they followed us in this drop at that middle level, which creates an interesting, you wonder why. However, this is the beginning of a nice, actually it's the essence of why school committees are brought together, I think, to allow encouraging ways financially as well as support to cause growth to happen. So as we come in 3 months from now and have the doctors, the teachers say, here's 15 minutes of observation of a periodic physical. And we're going to target the 1st grade through 3rd grade. And here's what we see. This is a challenge. This we've seen some success just in a short period of time. And I'd like to see that maybe once or twice or 3 times a year so that we can become, because this is a lot of data and I haven't had the opportunity to really, as you said, dig down. And that's the roles of the pros. And so I thank you to get these teams, and I think it's going to bring a great deal of focus and direction for the PLC meetings every other Wednesday, where they now have 2 or 3 hours of work that they can begin at least starting on the same page. So again, our thanks.
I just want to add something, if I may. After last night, a parent emailed Mr. Carpenter and myself about going home and talking to her daughter about math. And the parent said, you know, I had thought that, well, I learned it this way. Why isn't it good enough for, you know, kids? And her daughter, she asked her daughter, what do you think of the math? And her daughter said, well, sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. And when it's hard, I find a different way of doing it, and then it's easy again. So, and then the other thing, and to your credit, there were a few parents who were also teachers in other districts or administrators, and they were so envious after seeing the demonstration that you had adopted the program and approved it, because they knew what they were dealing with and what they were using, and they just thought, wow, this one gentleman said, you made the right decision. So anyway, thank you.
Ms.
Just
Stout.
on that same note, I spoke with a few parents who were at that meeting, and they loved it. They really felt like they had some idea what was going on. It's a great thing to do with the parents.
Well, and while I'm on, you know, public, there is an online component for parents and all the resources, and so we're making that available, and Ms. Jordan is helping with getting the word out and helping parents get online so that they can get those resources.
Just, the online resource would allow parents to be able to help their students with the homework and things of that nature?
They get all of the student resources online, and they have parent videos and resources of how to help your student, and actually, you know, watching parent how-to videos and so on. So it's a really robust suite of supports.
Let's hope parents take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Ms. Ryder?
I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. It was very comprehensive, and actually the issues or the questions that you had at the end actually answered all my questions, so thank you. That was really well done. How often do you use the map tool for analysis?
Well, we have our first window, we have 3 windows, actually 4 if we want. We have the option of 4 windows.
Yep.
We have the first window will close tomorrow, and then we'll look at the data on Wednesday in our training, and that'll give us an idea of how to use it, and then those leaders will push that data out. The next window will be in January, and so that's a midpoint, and we'll retest everybody at that point, and then if we see students that we're concerned about, we can retest them before the assessment.
Can we get some feedback
Absolutely.
after that?
Yeah.
Ms. Ryder?
That's what I was going to ask. Carrie had asked for feedback. That might be a good time period after the next assessment to just have an update of how things are going.
Sure.
You know, from here to there, that would be great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is bus routes and ridership. I just want to remind, before we go any further, I just want to remind the members tonight that we have obviously a very long agenda tonight, so we will try to limit everybody to no more than 2 comments on each topic. Bus routes and ridership, Mr. Carpenter.
So in your packets is a sheet that lists out our buses and just what the ridership is, you know, how many students are on a bus. Our school buses, it's interesting, if you look on the side of a school bus, it says, capacity 71 students. That would be 71 very small students, and you can imagine that by the time they get to the high school level that, thinking 3 students going across a seat is a little tight, even for some of the bigger elementary kids. 3 students going across a seat is pretty high. There's a want by the state to see ridership percentages be around 75%, because the state pays a portion of our regional transportation. So that's a factor that we have to keep in mind as a school district. The numbers here for ridership our ridership that's happening on any given day. The bus company was taking these numbers after we started our sports season at the middle school and high school. So some of these numbers are actually lower than they would have been in the first few days of the school year. And actually, Principal Wilson went and started his athletic program a week early to try to help some of the ridership, because we were having some struggles early in the school year, just trying to get some of the buses to run on time and to work out some of those routes. So you'll notice in terms of head count, we average each morning roughly 33 to 34 students are coming to school on a bus, which would have the ridership again around 48% on any given day. There are some students that will get a ride some days, and so this is just sort of an instantaneous. The number of students that actually ride the bus is probably larger than that, but that's how many that would be on a bus in a particular day. In the afternoon, we find a few more parents picking up students, so the ridership drops off, and we have in a number of our schools students staying after to go and get support and help. So we see the ridership drop down to about 30 students on the afternoon runs, which has the capacity of the buses. If we were looking at a 71 passenger bus, again, that works well at the elementary level, not so at the high school level. And then our ridership times, the average length of a bus run runs about 38 minutes is what the average run times are for the buses in the district.
Ms. Ryder?
I have a question. As far as the average route times, here you have specific route times for each bus. How were those measures determined? Because one bus driver that I spoke to said that her route's taking her an hour every day.
These are what's reported by the bus company to us.
So this is an average over a period of days, or this is just this specific day? See, that's what I'm.
Looks like a specific day.
What's
9:29,
9:29.
16.
That's for the head
Can
count. I was wondering.
I would imagine they did it all at the same time.
I'm just asking, because I was told more than once by this bus driver that her route was an hour consistently.
Ms. Izernio apparently has some information for us.
Katie Izernio, business manager. So to get the start, the wait times, I went and looked at the start and the finish time that's posted. And some of those, I know that the posted times are a little different than the actual times. So I know that there are a couple of buses that have some length challenges in terms of the duration of the time on the bus. So what this is based on is the posted information.
Okay, could we get actual information, and do we also have a time frame estimate when that's going to be reduced into the 40-minute range? I mean, in this particular case, this was an elementary school route that was 60 minutes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stout?
I asked for this information because a parent told me that their child was on the bus from Harwich to the middle school for 50 minutes to an hour every day going to school. And because that was so problematic, the parent had to get up the younger children that we're trying to have sleep in and bring the child to a much closer bus stop. So it's just defeating when we have these problems, especially in the AM. It's defeating the purpose. What I see is that the kids are spending as much time on the bus as they are in any given subject, or twice as much in some cases, and that's hard to think when we're thinking about time on task. That this is just such a waste of their time. Although some parents might be glad to have babysitting for a little bit extra time.
Mr. Russell?
Just an observation, interesting, the middle school and the high school PM runs and the occupancy, I would think that mostly the high school, if we have about 630, 40 youngsters here at the high school, would about a third or half of them play sports? Meaning they stay and they get their own rides. So I would have thought a lot of the numbers leaving the high school at 2:30 or whatever time they head out would be far less for legitimate reasons. Same with the middle school. I would think they'd have a couple hundred out of the 400 or 500 youngsters who stay because they are involved in all these things, and thus the run, which you can't help, would be less than the other run. The other, this has been an ongoing for years issue, depending upon who you are as far as reasonable minutes on a bus, and I don't know if there's a perfect solution. Karen mentioned one particular elementary bus run. I would suggest that we find out what bus number that is and have the bus manager chat with that bus driver to see if it's that every day, see if we can work with that individual bus. The other thought, one would say, and I can remember going back 4 or 5 years on this issue, that on average, if you had a youngster of which half the population take a bus, and the other half, mums and dads, aunts and uncles, drive them while they walk. If you say 40, 45 minutes on a bus, I know it's a long time and it could be scheduled in a history class, but without getting it, I would imagine, down to say 30 minutes, 25 minutes, you'd relate to how much money that would cost us to get another second or third bus in the runs. I don't know that exact figure, but that's where the financials come in. So it all depends what would be reasonable. Myself, I've always thought maybe if you can kind of average out 40, 45 minutes a day for the longest runs, that might be a worthy goal. Sometimes it'd be late with weather.
Anybody else? You know, it occurs to me that we addressed this issue on the assumption that there's a certain amount of time that's appropriate. But is there any information about, well, actually, let's start with the person who complained about the fact that the child was on the bus for 50 minutes or whatever it was. What was the downside to that? I mean, we assume that a long bus ride is harmful, but is there any data, is there any information or any studies that would indicate, you know, at what age it adversely affects a student to be on a bus for a particular period of time?
Well, for instance, the various children in that house have to get up earlier, and we've been talking about getting them more sleep.
So that adversely affected that parent's plan with the other children, but what's the effect on the children on the bus for a long bus ride?
I don't know, but when I was in charge of the bully prevention program at Chatham Elementary, the bus was the #1 place that bullying happened. The playground was the second, so more time in unsupervised, the least supervised part of the whole day for a child is on the bus.
Well, that's an anecdotal bit of evidence,
No,
right? I
there's
mean,
statistics.
if bullying could happen when the kid gets on the bus.
But there's statistics. We were in a test, and that was the statistics for the whole state, is that it was the #1 site of that, because there's no supervision on that. But I'm saying that other young children have to get up and be prepared to lose an hour's sleep possibly because of getting one child off. So even if we're just thinking about learning and being fit for learning, if we only looked at the ride to school, so they would be in the best shape for learning. Yeah, I'm sure that there are downsides to the ride home from school, but not for learning and academic time.
The reason I ask about, you know, what the harm is, or if there's any research on what a perfect period of time is I think it's obvious to everybody in the room that in order to significantly reduce the average bus trip length would require a significant increase in a transportation budget, which may be worth fighting for if we can establish that there's harm to the students caused by such a long bus ride. But I don't know where that information is, or other than anecdotal on particular parents.
I would be interested in finding out what it costs for one additional bus to go in the morning. I don't know if we know that. One additional bus.
So one additional bus a year is about $69,000.
$69,000, that's a lot of money.
Ms. Ryder?
I was just bringing up the length of the elementary school route because really, it seems excessively long for these kids to sit still and sit in their seats and not act up on the bus. I mean, I see them, and I'm one of the first stops on the route that I'm on, and they're already acting up. These, kindergarten, first grade, elementary kids. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Carpenter had previously stated that the routes would be kept to 40 to 45 minutes.
Well, that would certainly be a good goal, but obviously it's affected by where the students live and how many buses we have, and, it's not something you can have strict control over.
We need a logistics expert.
Is there I think I remember Mr. Russell bringing this up earlier, an earlier year when his grandchildren were involved. Do the buses go?
That resulted in, he was home in 10 minutes, the bus ride, it was very effective. So I was quite satisfied with.
Someone else was home in 50.
That's how it works out.
Do the buses go the same way going home as they do coming in? Are the same students on the same amount on the bus for the same amount of time in both directions?
Oftentimes, I think it depends on how the bus is routing. You can imagine, I think we have one of the Chatham Elementary buses. The bulk of its run is going straight out Route 28, and so conceivably, the child that's picked up right on the Harwich line would be the first one picked up, and you could imagine that you could run the bus and have the bus go the entire length out and drop that student off first, and then it will extend the overall ride for that bus, because the bus is not sort of going in a straight line, it's going all the way out and then coming and running its route back. So I think this is one of the things that the bus company was trying to balance out and try to keep the times. So the times of the routes that are posted are average within that 40, and I think the challenge is particularly when we have to go to some of the extremes of our two towns. How do you get the bus to where it needs to be? I mean, I know one of these middle school buses is only picking up or dropping off 18 students, and takes almost an hour to get from that long distance to just only bring 18 students to the school.
Ms. Long.
It seems to me that it's quite obvious someone's always going to be the first person on the bus and the last person off the bus. You're not going to be able to change that. But through observation and my own experience with, it happens to be a Chatham Elementary bus, maybe a discussion with the bus company yet again, maybe logistics need to go over. I know this particular bus for the first month took different routes every day. Would come from an opposite direction or would leave from an opposite direction. Couldn't count on it, so then your ridership goes down because parents need to get to work. We're going, well, forget about this. I'm not going to put my kid on the bus. I'm just going to go to parent drop-off and parent pickup. So maybe it's the routes. I was looking through the numbers, and there are some buses that look a little more weighted than others. Maybe it's a couple from this bus need to move over to this bus. Put a couple different kids, do some different routes. I don't know how you can do that in the middle of the year, but I know that one of the buses in particular, and I don't know which bus Mrs. Ryder is talking about, is still having problems. It's still passing my road when I'm already back from dropping off to school when school started, so.
In other meetings past, we've discussed partly in discussion of affecting the regional agreement, we've discussed the fact that there may be students who live in a location where the bus ride would be significantly shorter if they were going to an elementary school not in the town where they live. We've talked about the possibility of having students in East Harwich go to Chatham Elementary School as opposed to Harwich Elementary School, partly to shorten bus rides. Can you summarize, was there a conclusion that was reached as a result of that, or was that still being?
Well, I think we were looking at sort of a paper intellectual exercise of if what would taking one of these buses or a portion of these buses and heading it to Chatham Elementary School, what would it do to class size numbers, which is sort of the next conversation. Would it help balance out class size numbers? But that's all it's been is an intellectual, what happens if one of these buses goes a different, goes a different direction, and potentially, if you had 4 buses that were heading towards Chatham Elementary School, you might be able to come up with a little more creativity in terms of how the buses are going through. I think the challenges we have with our communities is we have pockets of population, and so a bus that is that's going down 28 may be doing largely just down 28 and having big pockets of population that are in small subdivisions off of that. We're having to grab people in little pockets everywhere, and you'll have some buses that, because of the concentration, particularly around Sam's building, there's a lot of households that live, in the near vicinity of Harwich Elementary School. So you'll see relatively short bus rides, and a lot of students getting off those short bus rides. There's not a whole lot of students that live in that immediate vicinity of Chatham Elementary School. It's so Chatham tends to have a little longer ridership just because of the way the population is aggregated around the schools. And I also had a email exchange with one parent. For some families, the long bus ride that is experienced in kindergarten, I think it was one of the families in Sam's building, they've got a house close to the corner store, so their ride's a pretty long ride. And my response to him is, I know it's been a long ride, and it'll continue to be a long ride because your house is a good distance away from Harwich Elementary School. But in 2 years from now or a year from now, when your child's in 5th grade, you're actually going to have the shortest bus ride in all of Harwich, because the buses are radiating into the middle school. So for some families, the ridership times do shift as the children move between elementary school to middle school, back to high school. And for families that are out on the periphery of each of our towns, just by the nature of where the schools are located, if you're far out in West Harwich on the Dennis line, it's likely always going to be a long bus ride to go out there first to pick up, and then you could imagine if you were to try to drop that student first, it just makes the bus ride far longer than what these ridership times are.
Ms. Scott?
So I know that in the spring, we requested the parents to send in their forms if they were riding the bus or not. And that's where the bus company came up with their schedules, is they basically use what I would assume is a pin board and try to figure out.
Well, these days it's an electronic version of a pin board.
Personally, would be a fan of the pin board.
But yeah.
So is it possible to tell them that we're not happy with these times, and we've had multiple complaints and concerns about bus riderships, to go back and say, all right, now that we are a month and a half into the school year, can you please go back and say, we have some students are probably not riding the bus for whatever reasons, maybe a job change from last June until now, and they can't ride the bus, and so maybe kids are and are not riding the bus that said they were going to go back to the drawing board or the computer screen.
Well, we did. They did
great.
reorganize and got it to where these are. So there was
Tell them to go back again?
There was.
This is after the fix.
Fix it again, it's still not okay?
Leave them alone.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's any perfect solution. I think what they attempted to do, there were I believe a middle school bus in particular that they tried to disperse a number of its students, because it then bumps up against a route at Chatham Elementary School. So that bus, I think that bus is now starting, as at least when I've talked with the bus driver when I've been at Robbins Building, I think that bus is starting its route on time. I think so the kids get off at the middle school and it's able to start its bus route on time. It's just the route that it needs to go, from the Harwich line, I believe it's the Harwich line down 28, pretty much a straight shot into Chatham. And because we ask the buses to go into the subdivisions off and not have the families come out to 28. And again, it's there's certain policy decisions that we've made that create a situation for the bus that it's doing the best it can to get down 28 in time to be there for the start of school.
Ms. Stout?
Yes, so on the 69,000, is that comes out of Monomoy, or is half of that paid by the state?
So the state pays I think it depends each year, but I think the state tries to do around 70% of it. And I want to emphasize that that's with Katie and I signing off saying that there's 75% ridership or 75% capacity
So we don't
of
put
the
up-
bus.
You're not under oath, then.
Well,
Ms. Long?
I was just gonna add, and I think, Scott, you addressed that maybe it's a policy issue, but the reality of consolidating some of the stops. And I understand that parents who don't have vehicles, there's a lot of different situations you're gonna run into, but in essence, the convenience of a bus and not having to be taken to school is nice. And then also consolidating, I know there's a lot of different places that cul-de-sacs consolidate. I also know that some of these buses are huge, and the places that they're trying to go down and manipulate and turn around in are just absolutely unreasonable. I kind of don't blame the driver. So maybe that would be what our approach to go back to the bus company with is, gee, is there a way that maybe we can stay within our safety policy for these kids and consolidate some of these bus stops to maybe cut down on the amount of stops?
Mr. Russell?
I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Would it be fair to say
I
that
use
this
my
is
two.
an ongoing issue that is reviewed on a regular basis, which is really all we can ask for at this point?
It is, and Jackie brings up a good point. I think for the bus company, we give them a set of parameters, and our parameters change from elementary to middle school. And for some middle school families, particularly those, the first time a family has a child in 5th grade, it's the eye opener that, oh, we expect that your child is walking out to 28 from the neighborhood, and but to send the elementary buses into each of the neighborhoods, and oftentimes, when you're diving into a neighborhood south of 28, it may be going in, quarter mile or a half mile to drop a child, and then coming back out, which is that constraint. And I understand what the policy is and how the bus company has to function. And I myself, went to rural schools from my elementary days all the way up through high school, and we hiked it out. I mean, that was, then again,
Through snow.
I lived on a dirt road, yes, so I couldn't imagine the bus wanting to go down it.
Last call, Ms. Scott, and then we'll move on to the next
I was
subject,
just gonna
please.
suggest that maybe following what Jackie's suggestion is, maybe sending notes out to the parents of elementary school students if they're interested and would be okay with to reduce ridership time walking to the end of their street. That's
Real quick, Ms. Ryder?
It's real quick. I can just say that on one of the bus routes, I have seen two things that were very strange. And you can tell that it was done by a computer because the route said, okay, go down this dirt road that has potholes and go to the right on this other dirt road, which is even more narrow and has more potholes, and make a stop. Then come back around to the other side and make a stop over there. Well, I think the bus driver just refused to go down there, which made sense. It didn't make any sense at all. Kids could go to the end of the road. It was a small road. I also noticed that there was one stop and then there was another one 3 houses down. So I think Jackie has a point that it might be a good idea for them to look at it a little more closely.
I think we're still waiting for that bus to show up.
But I think it gets to, we have the bus drivers drop off in front of the houses for our younger kids, and that's the constraints that, that we're saying if you have a kindergartner, the kindergartner's dropped right at the front door, which creates some challenges for the
No
buses.
one's dropped off in front of my house.
No.
We're dropped off on the top of the road, and my bus stop, we consolidated our kids, because there's like 6 stops between my road and Pete's or whatever, and no one's there. And so we consolidated ourselves, so the bus driver wasn't going rink, 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 it's silly. Some of them are really silly, so maybe sitting down and going, okay, what is the reality of these stops? How many make sense and how many really don't?
Next item on the agenda is district enrollment and class size.
So in your packet is the October 1 numbers. Each year, school districts compile their October 1 numbers. They have usually about a month to go and fine tune them if they need. But the October 1 numbers for our district are on the first page here. So our district enrollment for this year is 1,896 students. We break it out by Chatham residents, Harwich residents, and school choice residents. So the Chatham students represent 427 students of our district, the Harwich residents 1,239 students, and the school choice students 230 students. This is a different number than what we use when we go into budget season. When we go into budget season, we use what's called a foundation enrollment. And the foundation enrollment is all of the children in Chatham and Harwich that we're fiscally responsible for. So the 230 school choice students that go to Monomoy, we aren't fiscally responsible for them. They don't count in our foundation enrollment because they belong to Nauset or DY or Barnstable or Sandwich or wherever the child is coming from. That town or district is financially responsible for those children. What we are financially responsible for, and we won't have all of those numbers until the state compiles all the October 1 numbers, is all of the children that are attending Nauset, DY, Sturgis, Lighthouse Charter School. So, so those children who we have to pay their tuition, either because they're at a charter school or because they're there through the school choice program, those children end up in our foundation enrollment for this, for this fiscal year that we then use for a budget, for budgeting purposes. So we did an estimate based on what we think that foundation enrollment is relative to the foundation, relative to the students that we know are currently from Harwich and Chatham in our district. And what we see is a graph of the foundation enrollment, but over the last 5 years dropping by about 5%. And that's consistent with really what's happening Cape-wide, that we're seeing a slow decline in the number of school-age children across the Cape. What is, I guess, good news for our towns, or can be interpreted as good news, is if you look at the resident kindergarten enrollment, the families that are from Chatham and Harwich, and how many children they have coming into our kindergarten over the last 5 years, we have sort of a relatively flat W. So we're not seeing that same sort of 5% decline. We're seeing something that's hovering at around 135. And if you sort of extrapolate that out, if you have 135 students per cohort, and if you do what we hope to do with Monomoy, which is keep our families with us and not see our families heading out, we see the high school continuing to be hovering, at the 675 range, which is, this building was built to be at max 700. So we see the high school staying at that level. Again, and that's without having school choice students infused, so at present, what we've been doing is the number of choice students that are coming in are roughly offsetting the choice students that are leaving, but we should, be looking at a relatively leveling out on the foundation enrollment as we look out towards the long haul. I went and also just kind of put together a little retention grid and looked at cohorts and where are we seeing students that are coming, where are we seeing students that are going, and this would be we'll call it net cohort retention. So it's not tracking each individual moving in and out, but it's the net difference from 1 year to the next. So in the packet, if you look at the FY17 retention, if we're looking at grade 9 at the high school, grade 9, we see that there's 25 fewer students in grade 9 this year than there were 8th graders last year. Is how to interpret that. In the case of the high school, we saw most of those students splitting in terms of going to Cape Tech and to Nauset. And I think Bill's team's kind of broken that out. I believe we had 2 of those students went off to Lighthouse Charter. The good news, looking at that line, is we're actually seeing less students at the high school level heading out. That's good news. Good news for the high school. The concerning number, the thing that we still need to go and work on, is that middle school program. We're seeing a lot of students leaving at the end of 5th grade, and that's when some families are choosing Nauset, some families are choosing Lighthouse Charter, and that's the area that again, the hope is we see the scores that that Carla was talking about. We see these curricular pieces fall in place. What we have for the extracurricular opportunities for students at the middle school, they rival what you'd find at Nauset Middle School, what you'd find at any of the public schools, and far more than what's at Lighthouse. But I think for some families, there's a perceived difference that there's a curriculum difference out there. And I think for some families, I think it kind of plays out in a lot of conversations we've had is with families. Sports is still one of those big drivers on why families are looking out, looking at other districts.
Mrs. Ryder.
Regarding grade 9, where we're seeing the FY17 retention number is -25. Why is that good news?
There are fewer students that are heading out than in past. So we're seeing, we will always see about a dozen students head off to Cape Tech, and that's a perfectly great option for some families, and it's something that we support. If a vocational experience is right for your child and your family, we encourage families to go look at that program. It's that set of students that that are looking at Sturgis and seeing a benefit in the charter school, or seeing Nauset as having more opportunities than what we have. That's where we want to go and get those families and stay with us.
Mr. Ryder.
Could we also get the number that are choicing out and the number that are choicing in, because that is where the budgetary impact is, because we get less money for those choicing in than are choicing out? That would be useful, I think.
So on the front page has the numbers that are choicing in, and as I said, and when all districts report their October 1 numbers, the state then generates, here's where all of your students in the district who are going to public schools, we get a list that, so we know who's out and where and what the budget cost is.
So we would have to extrapolate the choice out, which if we have a negative 25 in grade 9, and we've got a positive 21 coming in, that's a negative 46. So that's how many you're choicing out altogether.
So one more time?
You're showing on, the choice in for grade 9 is 21, but the net is a negative 25. So the total that are leaving would be 46. Is that correct?
I don't think I understand.
I didn't follow it. Try it one more time.
25 are leaving.
You get 21 students choicing in to
Right.
grade 9, and you have 25 students going out.
The 25 I thought was the net of the in and out.
So you,
That's not the net?
so the 25 is the net. Yeah, so the 25 is the net out for that cohort. I guess I'm not understanding.
After allowing for the choice in.
Right, so we gained, or we, 4 of our, so if you look on the FY17 retention, there are 4 school choice students that opted to go someplace else but stay here at the high school. Maybe they went to Cape Tech, maybe they went back to their own district, maybe they went to Sturgis or some other district. So that's what we're finding out. I think from Bill's numbers, he has sort of a breakdown on where that is. 15 Harwich students chose to go someplace else, and 6 Chatham. Based on, from the 8th grade, from who was there in 8th grade.
Never mind.
Next, anybody else have a question, discussion? No? Okay, thank you. Bond anticipation note award. Mr. McCure.
As I indicated at the September 22nd meeting, we're at the point in the financing process where we owe what we call a bond anticipation note ban since October 21, 2016. That was issued back in October of 15 for $2 million, so it is now due to be paid off. And at this point in time, we are still in the process with MSBA of, we haven't filed our final requisition for payment yet. So we have not received any funds to offset some of our costs since 2014, mainly because of the 95% cap that they put on our reimbursement rate. So until we submit our final request for payment based on our final cost information, then MSBA takes upon a 10 to 12 month audit time frame in order to give us money back. So in order to pay this bond anticipation note off, we have to, in a sense, go back out, call for renewal, which means we have to, again, get some dollars in order to pay this bond anticipation note that's due October 21. So at the last meeting, I gave you a financing schedule, the time frame for how we were going to accomplish that. And also at that meeting, I indicated to you, based on Cape Cod 5 no longer being in what we call a financial advisor business, we gave you a presentation pertaining to First Southwest to become the financial advisor. So what I'm going to go over with you tonight is, number one, how we are using this other bond anticipation note, which I'll refer to as Band 7, and how we're going to finance this payment for our Band 6. So I'm going to go over the bidding process that I outlined at the last meeting. I'm going to go over with you the results of the bid. Also the award recommendation and the warrants that are necessary are already in your packets over there to retire Band 6. And the secretary has other forms that are going to require signature, which I received today from bond counsel in order to complete the whole band process. So that's what I will attempt to do this evening, dealing with the $2 million and also this bond anticipation note. First of all, we put together what we call a notice of sale, which was electronically distributed to prospective bidders. That was put together and sent out by First Southwest with the bids to be opened on October 11th and forwarded to them. The bond anticipation note that I was putting out there, as I indicated at the last meeting, was for $1.5 million. Yes, we do owe $2 million. But at this point in time, based on where we stand with the fund balance in the project, and based on the premiums that we received, both for bonding issues and other premiums throughout the anticipated bond anticipation notes that we previously did, there's $500,000 that I'm going to use from that in order to pay off this $2 million Band 6. In the in your packet that was distributed by the secretary, you had what we call a competitive note worksheet, which outlined the entire cover sheet for a 200-page document, which is called a notice of sale. That included all the financial statements from both Chatham and Harwich, as well as Monomoy, and also gave a review for any prospective bidders about what Monomoy is, and how it was formed, when it was formed, and also our own budget status, etc. So I didn't bring that obviously with me. That's why I gave you the cover sheet that was on that document. So the note indicated that there will be an award on the basis of the lowest net interest cost. And that meant that any bid that came in that was not at par, which means the 1.5 million, we weren't accepting any bids under 1.5. And I also requested a premium of $1,500. And so that had to come in as well. And the reason for the premium is to cover our issuance cost, because First Southwest and any financial advisor that we used in the past, including Cape Cod 5, charges for the service to put together the entire document, receive the bids, and in a sense prepare all the other documents that you're going to be signing tonight. So the $1,500 is not coming out of your operating budget. It will be coming out of this premium cost, and that's what it was asked for. In your packet, I also gave you some bid information. There were 3 firms that actually bid, and the net interest rate ranged from 0.8997 to 1.0940 for $1.5 million. I'd indicated at the last meeting that based on market conditions and also talking with First Southwest, that I felt the interest rate would be about 0.80, but it came in a little higher, but it's not significant from the standpoint of the FY18 budget, because the original estimate was $12,000. This is going to be close to 13 some odd. The 2 firms that submitted the same net interest cost, which was 0.8997, was Cape Cod 5 and Century Bank. The recommendation that I'm forwarding to you this evening is for the school committee to award the Band 7 to Cape Cod 5. And there are several reasons for that. Primarily, it's standard business practice when you're dealing with financial bids is for whatever firm, whatever bank, whatever bonding issue, called in the bid first. That's one of the reasons to give to that firm. The second thing is if you have 2 that are tied and the dollar amount for this band is only 1.5, it would cost us more money to split it between those 2 firms. And it would cost more interest, and it would not be economical for them to do that as well. And the third reason for going with Cape Cod 5 is that they are already the holder of Band 6 for the $2 million. which means we don't have to use the US Bank that's part of First Southwest's process to be the transfer and paying agent, which means there's another fee involved there. So since Cape Cod 5 is already the holder of Band 6, there won't be any cost for us to transfer that money into our account and then pay the Band 6 as well. And then the other part of dealing with Cape Cod 5 is our bid indicated that we wanted to make sure that if any bank was going to be selling the note to other people, which you normally would do, depending on the size of it and what kind of bid you would also get to give it to other people to bid on. We told them that we were not going to be paying it off early, mainly because of the time frame that we were thinking about from SBA. However, with Cape Cod 5 being the holder of Band 6 and also being the holder of Band 7, if you accept my recommendation, I've already got an agreement with them that if MSBA completes their audit in advance of our time frame when this new band is due October 20th of 2017, we can pay it early using, obviously, the MSBA funds that we're eligible for. And therefore, it would reduce your interest rate that you would be paying in FY 18. So that's another offset to why I would recommend going with Cape Cod 5. So at this point, as stated in the notice of sale also, there's a requirement that I can recommend the award, but it has to be approved by the school committee. And that's part of the overall process for signing notes, sending in any information to both the Department of Revenue, Bureau of Accounts, where they keep track of every note and every bond that I have issued since 2011 on this project. And in addition, everything has to also go to the Internal Revenue Service to make sure that, number one, we're not getting any additional funding beyond what we actually need to complete the project. So that's one of the other reasons that I'm using some of the funds at this point out of the the building project fund balance in order to pay off Band 6. So inserted into your packet, when you get to the action item on the agenda, I put together what is required, which is a treasurer's certificate of award, and I also put together a motion for the school committee to vote on the award to Cape Cod 5, and also to acknowledge appointment of First Southwest as the district financial advisor. Included in your warrants this evening, if you approve the recommendation, are the warrants that will retire Band 6. One is to pay the interest of $13,000. The other warrant is the $500,000, which the source of those funds is from the building project. And then the principal of 1.5, the source of the funds is Band 7. Attached to your packet as well, plus it's on the back of the warrant, is the authorization to use the proceeds for that particular purpose. So that's what's in that packet. The secretary has other forms that require the signature of the school committee, and there's additional forms that require the signature of the chair of the school committee as well. So when you get to your action item, if you approve my recommendation for the award to Cape Cod 5, the secretary has the documents that require signatures, and she also has to provide a district seal. At this point, I'll take any other questions if you have it.
Mr. Duval.
I move that the Monomoy Regional School District Committee approve the district treasurer's award of the $1,500,000 general obligation bond anticipation note renewal dated October 21st, 2016, and payable on October 20th, 2017, to Cape Cod 5 Cent Savings Bank, in accordance with the terms set forth in the notice of sale dated October 6, 2016, and further voted that each member of the committee and the district secretary and the district treasurer be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver such documents necessary to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes, and further voted that the Monomoy Regional School District Committee approves First Southwest, a division of Hilltop Security, Inc., Boston, Massachusetts, to serve as the financial advisor to the Monomoy Regional School District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous vote. Mr. McCure, I want to
Thank you.
thank you. You have managed our debt extraordinarily well all these years. And, you know, I know you told us you thought it would come in at 0.8%, and it came in at 8.99, but you've done such a good job that I'm not going to make a motion to take it out of your salary.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Fiscal 2017 quarterly financial report, Ms. Izernio.
In your packets are the first quarter report information for FY17, July 1st through September 30th. And I think it's interesting to note, we have a $36 million budget, but here we are at the end of the first quarter, and all but $2.2 million of it is encumbered. So we have the salaries and all of the contracts that we've got obligated. And that's not to say that 2.2 is just left. There are things, as I've mentioned in the past, we don't encumber, like general supplies for the schools and substitutes and et cetera, so it really goes to show how much the budget is committed right from the get-go. We've expended year-to-date $7.4 million, and with an encumbrance of $26 million. Yeah, leaving just over 6% of the budget unexpended and unencumbered at this time. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, and I'd just like to extend to our new members, anytime we could sit down and I'll be happy to go through just what the lines and the numbers mean. And on our website, we did put the chart of account information, so you can see that all those numbers, just like a phone number, will lead you somewhere. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about what's been delivered.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Ryder.
Just a question about in the budget balance, we've got a negative 2,923. Is that going to be a cost center transfer or what's?
There will be a cost center transfer, but not at this time.
And why is that happening? Is there a particular reason behind that? If it's in here, I can afford it.
Just give me a minute. I think it's a couple of different little pieces of it. The main reason for the overks is we had a individual who retired from the business office, and when they left, they received their their sick day buyback, and that was that amount for that.
Okay.
So then also in the packet is the other revenues for this period of time, and I can't put my hand on it.
Last page.
There we go. Close it is. So, with the assessments, every other month, we get an assessment from Chatham, an assessment from Howard. It worked out well, so that for our cash flow purposes. And we have our revenues budgeted the same $36 million, and year-to-date, we've received $8.9 million. We don't get our first regional transportation reimbursement until around December. And one of the things I just wanted to mention when we were talking about regional transportation, we are only reimbursed for students who live beyond 1.5 miles from the schools that are transported. So it's not for every child. Anyway, so we've received our first couple of payments in Chapter 70 monies, and not until, I think it's December as well, that we get the first charter reimbursement, and then it's every month thereafter. So no surprises there. And that's all for this.
The charter reimbursement of $99,735, do we know how much that represents per student?
I don't know, because there's a formula that, for the first year that a student attends a charter school, you're reimbursed at a certain rate, and then each year, the reimbursement rate decreases. So I don't know in the makeup of the students that we have that are attending a charter school, where they are in that reimbursement formula.
At any time in the process, does the state reimburse us 100% for any of the cost of sending a student to the charter schools?
No.
Do you know what the average or the, not so much the average, but do you know what the most is that they have, as a percentage that they have funded in the time that you've been with us? I'd have to put you on the spot. I don't know how you would know that, but
Yeah, I don't
since that's
know.
an issue coming up for an important ballot item, I think it might be worth discussing the effect of charter reimbursements.
What I do know is that we have a line item in our budget, and that we spend, we get assessed for students going out of over $1 million. And we're going to be receiving an estimated 99,735 coming in for
So-
charter schools.
Out of over $1 million it's costing us to send students, but it's costing the two towns in combination to send kids to the charter schools, we're getting $99,000.
Yes, estimated, projected for FY17.
Doesn't sound like 100% to me. Mr. Russell?
Okay, quickly, I think I know the answer. Regarding the bus conversation you alluded to a moment ago, can one assume that we're not giving rides to anybody within that mile and a half?
Oh,
Other
no,
than-
we are, we're transporting,
So you
yes.
can't assume this, so we are picking up those
I
routes.
think it's about 30% of the students live within a mile and a half of the schools. And it's all the schools. So then those we deduct from the formula that we put in to get reimbursed for the regular day transportation.
Which is a good thing, of course, but also adds time to the runs.
Right.
It does, and
Mr. Carpenter?
we also have, not all of our neighborhoods surrounding the schools have sidewalks to the schools, so it's, so I think the decision to transport is one that's also a safety decision too, so I think a lot of why both towns did that prior to us coming together as a district is, there are some sidewalks along some of the main strips, but once you head off, if you're at Chatham Elementary, I don't even think a nearby neighbor 2 seats down from me there's no sidewalk in front of her house, to walk on, and there's limited sidewalks, branching off of Kroll Road. There's sidewalks in sort of the immediate main streets near Sam's building, but not beyond that, and sidewalk going down Oak Street to the main drag on Main Street, but again, fairly limited.
Any further questions, discussion on these issues? Thank you. While you're there, in the interest of time and in the interest of the necessity of dealing with all of our action items as the highest priority tonight, would you like to address the prior year invoices and the budget transfer requests while you're there?
I'd be happy to. So we have a prior year invoice. There are some officials that need to be paid, and so we have a group of officials that were paid for some services they performed in the spring for Monomoy that totals $1,410.50. And I'm respectfully requesting that we use current year funds to pay these officials that we reached out to let them know that we would be addressing their oversight.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the payment of prior year funds for sports officials in the amount of $1,410.50.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous vote.
budget transfers. And one of them is to transfer $6,000 from the virtual high school tuition line and put it into the instructional software line to pay for the software license for the, it's the software that the Principal Burkhead spoke to, and I believe Mr. Bennett from the guidance office about with doing the summer school classes, and I can't remember the name of the software, but we don't have the need for the virtual high school tuition line anymore, so to move those funds to cover the software that was approved for purchase.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the transfer of $6,000 from account ending 1820 FY17 to account ending 3555.
Is there a second?
Second.
Catch any of those?
And the vote is because we're moving from one cost center to another, so it's taking out of a 9,000 tuition cost center and putting it into a 2,000 instructional, and that's. And then the next is.
Well, we have to vote on it.
Oh, sorry.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous vote.
Okay, so the next, it's kind of exciting. We have the, that's the word.
The little things.
We have the special education grant, and in the past, we have charged teacher salaries to the special education. It's the 94-142 grant. Whenever you use a federal grant and you're paying salaries, then right off the top, Mass Teachers Retirement is taken away from the grant award. So with nice conversations with Melissa, our Director of Student Services, she was saying, well, why not charge transportation? Then we don't have that MTRS payment come right off the top. More funds stay in the district. There's a couple of, it's not all completely win-win because there's some Medicaid things that come in. So anyway, so what these transfers are doing are taking $151,000 from the transportation cost center of the 3,000s and putting it into different special education teacher salary lines. And then we'll be then using the 240 grant to pay the tuition, the transportation invoices. So there are 4 salary lines that the funds are being transferred into.
Let's see, third page in from the back of her large handout.
That's a test, isn't it?
Is there a motion?
It's in this one?
I move that we transfer from account number 1,030, 330, 440, 331, 02, 1464, 151,000 to account number 1,011, 2305, 110, 600, 002, 3450 in the amount of $26,929 to account number 1,022, 2305, 110, 600, 002, 3450, $48,800.57, and to account 1,022, 2320, 110, 600, 02, 3465, the amount of $72,116.47 for a grand total of $151,000.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Discussion, Ms. Stout.
Yes, I'm a little confused because what were we paying prior to this? What were we using that grant for?
These salaries.
Okay.
So with that, we would be paying these salaries, but anywhere, is it 9 or 11% empty? 11? 9. So when you charge a salary to the grant, right off the top, 9% gets taken to pay for the Mass Teachers retirement, in addition to the Mass Teachers retirement that the teachers already contribute. So what we're saying is, why not keep more of the grant money here in the district? And instead of charging a salary, which we do need that last one that appears to be crossed out, why not keep that additional, those monies here, and not have it go right off to MTRS?
So we're paying with it from more general funds, not the grant, to do that?
So we're gonna pay for the salaries out of the general fund, and we'll pay for the special ed transportation out of the grant. So it's just a flip.
Okay.
Mr. Duval, I need you to amend your motion,
Yes.
please.
And also, transfer to 1,030, 2320, 300, 600, 002, 3467, the amount of $3,153.96.
Who seconded the motion? Mr. Russell, do you second the
Yes.
amended motion? Any further questions or discussion?
And
Ms. Richardson?
doing the flip, is, that's okay with the grant, the people who provide the money for the grant?
So when
They don't care that it's flipped?
No, well, because we hadn't submitted the grant application. So when Melissa submitted the grant application, she put it in that we would be paying for transportation.
Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous approval. Anything further? Sorry?
Under the superintendent's report, did you want me to say anything about the audit?
Yeah, we'll
bring
get
it
to
up
that.
then.
We'll get to that. Thank you. Moving back into our previous agenda, the next item under reports and discussions is norms and protocols. This was a set of norms and protocols prepared by the protocol subcommittee, which we discussed at our workshop and voted on at our workshop. Is there any kind of introduction or anything anybody wants to say from that subcommittee, kind of summarize this at all? Ms. Scott?
We can just follow up by saying that when we did the MASC governance workshop, it was suggested by Ms. Presser, who led the workshop from MASC, that we use information that we gathered from the workshops to develop a norms and protocols for ourselves. So while this is a public document, this is, as the second line says, we will follow these norms and protocols in the conduct of our business as school committee members. So this is a listing of things that was brought up by the whole committee and then narrowed down and made into a nice document by the subcommittee.
Everyone had sufficient time to review the proposed norms and protocols? Anybody have any concerns or questions? Ms. Stout?
One of the bullets talks about coming prepared to meetings. So I think it's going to be essential that we have all the information at least a week in advance in order for us to come prepared.
Okay. Any other concerns, questions? Is there a motion to approve the proposed norms and protocols? No, don't need that.
It's not on
It's
the
not on our
agenda.
agenda.
You're right. Any further discussion about norms and protocols? All right, so we'll consider this the first. I thought we voted on this once in our workshop, and we were going to vote on it again tonight.
I don't know if
Isn't
we
this
ever
the second
voted.
discussion?
No.
Mr. Duval?
Pardon me, I didn't get what Sharon said. You're saying that we need to have the information a week prior to the,
Yes.
In order
Which
to
we
carry out the
basically do.
protocol. She's suggesting that would be a way to meet this protocol goal.
All of the information for tonight, for instance. If-
we got last Friday.
Right, I'm
Yeah,
not saying we don't get a week in advance, but I think it's going to be important because occasionally we get things later, and then we can't be prepared for it.
And that's only when Murphy steps in.
I know.
It does happen. Thank you. I just needed clarification.
Thank you. So we will not be, all right, so before we get to future agenda items, just to make sure we have enough time, and we have a subcommittee report regarding the bullying policy draft from the policy subcommittee.
So basically.
Ms. Stout.
Thank you. Because I had been the one that had a problem with this, we took essentially what was in the mask sample policy for this and used it for ours. So it has everything correct in it, the bullying prevention, the bullying definition, and all of the other things. Is there anything else?
That covers it, I think.
Yeah.
So is there a motion? Mr. Duval.
The draft you have here in front of us, what changed from our current policy?
Quite a few things, but the one thing I can think
Could we have a red line version so we can see what's changed?
Oh,
I mean, that would be normal protocol to see what was to what is.
do we have that?
It's particularly if it's more than just a couple of minor changes.
Right.
This was
Ms. Scott.
This was a update provided by MASC from, I think, 2014. So a great deal has changed. It's actually quite a bit different. So we can provide that, and it's quite a bit different from the original policy, because that was out of date.
Mr. Duval.
I would suggest that we have an opportunity to compare it to whatever we have on our disc before we make any.
This is probably our first reading anyway, right?
Right.
It could probably be done before the next meeting.
To facilitate it, we can send a copy of both.
Send a copy of both and you can figure it out for yourself. Ms. Ryder,
I typed this particular one up, so I can do that.
the red line version?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion about the proposed change in the bullying prevention policy? Okay, thank you. Mr. Carpenter, Superintendent's report.
All right, I appear on in reports and discussions, I appear to have done district enrollment, but forgot the class size and part of it. If I may go backwards, Mr. Chair.
You must.
No, we missed the chance.
Also, in your packets, I'll pass out an email that I think that Barbara sent the group as well, to just to help summarize this. In your packets, there's a document that has class sizes for every one of the classes that the core academic classes that are happening at Chatham Elementary, Harwich Elementary, middle school, the middle school, and high school, just in terms of where we are. The document that I've just passed out to you that Barbara had previously also compiled looks at what's the average class size, but also gives the minimum maximum of that you'd find there. So, when we're looking at Chatham Elementary School, the average class sizes that we're seeing at Chatham Elementary School in kindergarten are 15 in kindergarten, 19 in kindergarten at Harwich Elementary School. At first grade, 14 average class size versus 16. Second grade, 19 average class size versus 17 average class size at Harwich Elementary School. Third grade, 16 average class size at Chatham Elementary School versus 19 at Harwich Elementary School. And then grade 4, 20 at Chatham Elementary School and 20 at Harwich Elementary School. And I just want to point out just quickly here that what we see in particularly in grade 4, sort of a byproduct of pre-Monomoy coming together. So before Monomoy came together, the Harwich Elementary class sizes looked much more like what that fourth grade cohort was. So Harwich at the time had brought in a number of school choice students to have a large enough elementary school so that after attrition, you'd have a large enough student body at senior year in high school. As we came together, we've been ratcheting down the number of school choice families that are coming in at Harwich Elementary School to try to stabilize that number and get it as close as we can to Chatham Elementary School. So you'd actually notice if you kind of flip back to the document that we were talking about on enrollments, you'll notice that the number of students that are choicing into Chatham Elementary School right now is we have a total of 43 students choicing into Chatham Elementary School versus 45 students choicing in to Harwich Elementary School. So, so we've been, letting families know, that there's opportunity to choice in Monomoy. It's just the choice that we have open is Chatham Elementary School, and largely restricting the school choice at Harwich Elementary School to siblings that are already there. Another phenomenon that I believe we're also starting to see more and more is that before we regionalized as a district, about 20% of Harwich students choiced to Chatham, and that happened early on. So we saw a lot more Harwich students at Chatham Elementary School. With regionalization, that pressure to choice to Chatham has subsided some, because now what happens after Chatham Elementary School is the same regardless of which elementary school you go to. So some of the class size numbers it's been kind of a little challenge to balance those out, that we're seeing fewer families from Harwich looking across to Chatham because of what comes next. At the middle school level, class sizes that we're seeing in math, science, and social studies range between, for grade 5, range between 17 and 18 on average. Grade 6, for the core academic subjects, it ranges between 16 and 18 as the average class size. Grade 7, we see across the core academic disciplines, 16 as the average class size. When we get up to the high school, we see smaller class sizes in 8th grade, and that's part of the teaming that we've put in place, so that the class sizes range from 14 on average for math to 17 on average for history and social studies. At grade 9, those subjects range from a low of 13 on average in science to high of 16 in history or English. 10th grade, we see average class sizes in history and English at a low of 17, going up to a high in science at 10, at a high in science of 19. And then grade 11, we see a low of an average class size in English at 14, with a high on the average in math at that grade level at 17. Then we get to finally senior year, we see a low on average class size in math at 15, and a high in the average class size at 20 for ELA. And again, I want to emphasize that these are the averages. There's a range. There are a few classes that we'll see at the high school that have mid-20s, and we have some classes at the high school that are very small. And again, many of those class sizes that are very small, kind of looping back to Carla's presentation, are classes that are deliberately small to support kids that need extra support in math or English or another subject. So it's all in all, I would say, most districts out there in the Commonwealth would look at the class sizes we have and say, this is great. We need to be cognizant of how we let in students when it comes to choice to try to keep those elementary numbers down. I think we've done a nice job over the last couple of years to try to push. I mean, when we started here in the district, the biggest class sizes we had were in Sam's building, and we're trying to get the elementary classes to a place where they're nurturing across our 2 elementary schools.
Thank you. Discussion, Ms. Stout.
This information is very helpful and a little lower than I expected. So that's great. Some of the particulars I'm curious about, and that is for certain classes, if there's 2 AP classes of the same thing and one has a very small number and one has maybe 4 over number, why would that be?
A lot of it depends on the cohort that's traveling around. So while my son's in 9th grade, it was interesting at the curriculum night to go around, and I think by virtue of some of the choices he's made in his schedule, so he's taking Mandarin, and there's only 1 Mandarin class, so all of the students at his grade level that are in 2nd year Mandarin are start traveling together, and so you're going to find sets of students that will create. So you might have it could be the difference between one set of students is in band, and that they would all be going to the same band that's in a particular block, and that might mean that it's a larger number of a smaller number. So part of it's just how the whole schedule matrix gets put together. So it's I think conceptually we'd like to say, hey, we want to have those 2 as even as they can, and just by virtue of trying to give the students the choices that they want outside of that particular class sort of creates some of those discrepancies.
My reason for wanting this was basically to see what the student's experience would be. If the students were in a very small class, especially if they needed extra help in that makes perfect sense. Students in a larger class, though, would have a very different experience, for instance, in that case. So the schedule is dictating the experience of the kids. But do you think they come out with the same information?
I think they come out with the same information. I believe that again, going back when the dad had, I believe my son is probably in one of the larger history classes we have, and I know the experience that he's having in there. It's large, it's moderately large. It's not necessarily large looking beyond our district. So I think the want is to have the classes as close to those guidelines, and I think that's what we've tried to do as we put together the budget, is to staff it to be circling that guideline, and we go into these conversations with our select boards and finance committees to emphasize this is what a supportive class looks like. And you have times, particularly in the upper level, the history class that I'm referencing is an honors level history class, and are there a few more kids than you'd like? Sure, but if you tried to go and push that one down to 19, we're likely having to add another section of history, which means there's one less section of something else that's getting taught somewhere in the matrix, so somebody else isn't getting what they want.
So this and the bus ridership are things that I wanted to come up before we were planning the budget for this year, in case there were budget implications for them.
Good point, thank you. Anything else, Ms. Ryder?
You had said there, if I'm not mistaken, that there weren't very many classes over the maximum of our 18 plus or minus too. It looks like we have 25 classes that are over 21, plus another 11 that are at 24 or 25, and one at 27. So if I counted correctly on this schedule master list, that's 37 that are over our guidelines. That's quite a few. And there are also some that are showing, 3 students or 2 students in class. Am I reading this incorrectly?
I think when you see 3 or 2 students in a class, you're seeing a class that's running as a co-course. I'd have to go back and look at which one, but but oftentimes you'll have students, and the teacher is being flexible and teaching, having students that co-enroll in the class.
There's a couple here. Engineering, energy production probably runs with electronics and electricity, which is also under engineering. That makes sense. Some of the other ones
And I
don't.
think those might be kids that are doing independent studies in an engineering class.
Yeah, it doesn't say that. There is one that says independent study. I consider that separate because it's independent. But what are you doing to work on these classes that are 27, 25, and 24 that are over our 20 guideline of maximum?
Well, again, I think when you put together a high school scheduling matrix, you've got to make decisions as to what's that large class size that you want to keep, you want to keep below. I know when Bill works with his team putting the schedule together, before guidance can put that next child into a class that I think maybe it's 22, that you have to go get the authorization to go beyond that. And in the cases where you see the numbers that start to tick up, the option becomes either you put the child into that class or they're not getting a class that they want somewhere else in their schedule. So it's, but again, for every one of the classes that you just mentioned now, there's a class significantly below that average that gets it to balance out.
Right.
I would say that if we have these really small classes and these really large classes, then they need to be balanced out as much as possible. This seems quite disparate. I just didn't expect to have so many large classes and so many small ones as well. And I realize it's a function partly of the guidance department and of scheduling.
And need. It's many of those small classes are students that need a smaller environment, and many of the classes that are larger classes are upper level sections, honors classes that the students and teacher can have a good, functional, robust class given the students that are in the room.
Any further discussion? Class size. Thank you very much. And proceeding to Category G, Superintendent's Report.
All right.
BAC update, one of our favorite
Yeah,
weekly topics.
Yeah, well, Terry and I had the fortune and Katie to spend a while on the roof of the high school this past week as technicians and engineers spoke to come up with a solution for the serpentine coil. It appears that they have a solution in place that is getting agreed upon, and now it's just trying to get all the parties to mobilize. It's complicated in terms of what they want. They had the idea is to have a sensor that's feeling or noticing that the conditions inside these cabinets is getting so cold that the heating coil may freeze. And if it senses that, it shuts all of the louvers and makes the cabinet warm enough so the pipes don't freeze, so that we don't have the floods. And what we also want to make sure is that Train, the manufacturer of these units, will back up and assure us that what gets put in will protect us. So there appears to be forward momentum, and knock on wood, that this will be in place in the next couple weeks.
Can I ask a
Ms.
question?
Ryder.
The contractor that we're having problems with, did we not just award them another contract for 3 years for service on some units? I don't remember exactly, it was a while ago. Does anyone else remember? Was it not the same company? Katie, maybe you could speak to that, do you remember?
Ms. Zernio.
We would, last year, we went out to bid for a maintenance contract for the rooftop units, and Train was the lowest bidder, responsible bidder for that particular bid, and it was awarded to them for a 3-year service and maintenance contract on the rooftop units. That's exactly right.
Ms. Ryder.
I'm just wondering if, considering the problems with the unit, if that's a contract we're locked into?
It was awarded 1-year contract with 2 1-year options. And then the only flip side was the next lowest bidder was double the price.
I remember it was quite a bit higher. I just wondered because we've been having problems with the same contractor, that's all. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Stout.
I think I remember last time we talked about this, it was that we had to do something specific, but I'm not sure if it was available. And then if we didn't do that, it wouldn't be warranted.
So, we were clear that whatever they do, that the manufacturer needs to back up and say that this will protect us. There was a period of time where there was a communication saying, sure, we'll put the sensor here, but we won't guarantee that it's not going to freeze. So they've been working through that to make sure that everybody's on board and coming up with some scenarios on how to simulate a freeze condition. So you can imagine spraying like a coolant into the cabinet that would then simulate a cold condition to test the sensors. But it's interesting how many parties have to be involved in this, because you have the manufacturer of the unit, you have the individual who programs the unit, which is a completely different company, you have the engineers who hired or who purchased and installed the Train units, and you have the engineer for the architect, and all those individuals are collaborating on a solution that that we're all eager to have in place before it gets cold here in Massachusetts.
So does this mean a warranty, or it doesn't mean a warranty?
It would mean that the units have coverage.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I believe you all received the emails that go out and blast to the district. I just wanted to give an update on where we are with the athletic director. I met last week with Principal Burkhead and Principal Wilson, who were leading a hiring committee that had on it a parent, a coach, a former athletic director and community member. They had tried to have a student also on the hiring committee, but because of game obligations, the student couldn't be there. They met with folks. Their top person that they really liked is a woman. Her name's Karen Gilmet. She is I met with her. She came down. She is a woman who graduated from Bridgewater State College with a degree, a master's degree in physical education. She went to college, was a star high school athlete, went to college, played college girls lacrosse and girls soccer, went off after college to be a soccer coach, coached as an assistant coach, and then a women's college head coach for soccer. There was an opening at her alma mater. She went to Bishop Fenwick, so she took the chance to go back to her alma mater to teach and coach girls lacrosse and girls soccer. Over the past decade, while she's been there, she has had phenomenal success both in the classroom and on the athletic fields with, with a strong winning percentage. Multiple times she's been listed in the papers on the North Shore as the coach of the year for either soccer or lacrosse or both. And she has she's been the assistant athletic director for the past I think 7 years at Bishop Fenwick. Has been out there looking for an athletic director job, and I think as I think many young first-time administrators, getting that first job can be challenging, and I think we were really lucky that a few school districts passed over her, and she was the bridesmaid, not the bride, at an athletic director search, and was available for us. So I was really excited to meet with her and speak with her. I also appreciate that how torn she was about coming here too soon. She'll be joining us full-time on the ground in sort of early to mid-November when the soccer season's over. But for her, she wanted to make sure that she finished out the season with her team, and I respect that. I think it says a lot about her character and what she'll bring to us in the long haul. In the meantime, Kathy Andrews, who used to be the middle school athletic director and has been doing an administrative internship, will be shifting over and helping us until Karen is on boots on the ground full time. Although Karen will be here meeting with parents this weekend, and she and Kathy are already in conversation. So the two of them will help this transition in athletic directorship be seamless. Last night we had a Boosters Club meeting and shared with them the news, and it was very well received by that group. So kind of excited to see Karen down here, and we'll look forward to having her join us at a school committee meeting to have you get to meet her firsthand.
Ms. Ryder.
Does she have the supervisor license?
She doesn't have a supervisor license yet. She will potentially be able to apply and use her experience as a department. She's been a department chair for, I believe, her entire time while she was at Bishop Fenwick. So she's gone through the education system supervising people, and I'll work with Carla and Karen on how to navigate the DESE. The challenge for her is, while she was doing all of that, she wasn't in the state system. She was in the Catholic education system, and so she has those experiences. But for her to be able to go and evaluate teachers, we need to get her licensed as a administrator supervisor.
Ms. Ryder.
So if I understand correctly, she has not applied for this license either?
She hasn't yet, no.
How long will it take for her to receive this license, because who's going to be doing the evaluations in the meantime?
Well, the evaluations, her job is to evaluate, or her primary job is to evaluate coaches. What we would want her in the long haul to do is to be part of a team that takes on sort of oversight of the wellness curriculum, kindergarten through high school, so that the only teachers that she would be evaluating over the long haul would be the gym, physical education teachers at the elementary, middle, and high school.
Who would be evaluating them in the meantime?
Currently, the principals do that. So So the question as to how long it will take, I think it really depends on whether, I've never had to go through a process with somebody that's had extensive experience in a Catholic school system and what the state will go and credit her with or not. If not, we'll look towards a leadership licensure program to have her go through.
Ms. Stout?
In light of what happened with our last athletic director, I understand that we paid for his master's degree, and he was only here 1 year, so I'd like to maybe put on the agenda for another time that how much do we contribute for the maximum a year per staff member, and if they leave with, if we don't get so much time out of them in the system, what they might need to reimburse.
Well, just to be clear on that, what we did is we paid for a leadership licensure program and brought him in very low so that he was, so he wasn't paid, what you would typically pay an athletic director would have been what we were paying him plus the cost of that program. So it was largely paid for out of his sweat.
Ms. Long?
I just had a question. Was our past athletic director, was he evaluating the teachers at the time, or the principals at that time doing it?
The principals were.
So there will be actually no change between who's supervising them at this point?
No.
Ms. Ryder?
So, is this a similar situation where our new athletic director will have a lower salary, yet we're going to pay for the leadership licensure program?
That's what we'd like to see if that's what she needs.
But are we bringing this new athletic director in at that lower salary?
I think salary would not be best discussed in a public session.
Well, I'm just asking in general terms. You brought up the lower salary versus a regular salary, in just general terms.
Well, you discussed it in regard to a person who's no longer with us.
True. Okay.
I think we should probably
We'll let it- I'll
avoid
let it
that
go.
issue at this time. Any further questions or comments about the new athletic director?
My apologies on that.
And also in your packet is a notification. I don't know if Katie wants to sort of chime in on this one. We were not only the lucky recipients to have a district review from the DESE that Barbara and my team are spending a lot of time compiling all of the documents that they want for that, and at our next school committee meeting, I believe we'll be able to share the final schedule of when they'll be here to visit. But we have also been selected for an IRS audit, so Katie can go and fill you in on that.
So it was a wonderful day when I opened the mail. So we're going to be audited for the 2014 calendar year from the IRS. So I spoke with the agent who's going to be conducting the audit, and I asked if it was a random audit or was it, maybe the product of a complaint, what triggered that. And she said, no, it was because we showed such significant growth with our tax ID number. So there was a red flag for that. And the reason for that is our first year in existence, we only paid taxes for 6 months because we went into effect July 1st, 2012. So that is what prompted, us to be, red flag in terms of the growth. But then when they researched it further and saw that we were a new entity, they thought it would be a perfect opportunity to come and make sure that we understand our obligations to the IRS and that we're, following things. And, and what I'll say is that she'll be coming next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. Had put on the schedule Thursday and felt that perhaps she would not need to be here on Thursday, but wanted me to be well aware that the audit is actually going to take place over a series of several months, and that one thing might lead to another. So I just want to say, it is what it is, and we'll fix anything that needs to be fixed.
And we won't be withholding our tax returns until the audit is complete.
Well, so I've never experienced that, but so we'll see. There were about, I don't know, 9 pages of things that we've been gathering.
Are you excited?
Sorry. I don't know.
Doesn't
We'll
get
see.
much better than this.
So we're getting, and then we said our next and last thing will be when we do the MSBA audit, and that will be exciting to have that done.
So, we also just, some quick FYIs, I had a wonderful experience this past week with Sam Hine and Melissa McGuire and Kathy Andrews, who's doing the administrative internship, joined me. Spent 2 days at Dennis Yarmouth going through a FEMA multi-hazard response training, and it was a nice experience to kind of reflect upon our crisis plan for the district. Where are there areas that we can go and improve it? How can we go and now take this, work with our police and fire in our 2 communities to again make sure that the schools are safe as possible for our kids. But a great experience, really a worthwhile 2 days. So I appreciate their joining me and taking some time out of busy schedules. In your packets as well, there's a front and back. This is what I refer to as the school committee challenge. So last night at the boosters meeting, we discussed putting together a sort of one-pager that you could give to a business and say, we would love for you to join us as a partner on the concession stand project. So the challenge before this committee is, before our next meeting, take this and go find a community partner for us, and we'll see how it plays out. But I'd encourage you to sort of reach out to businesses that you might know in town and see if they would be interested in partnering with us. We have on this a picture of what the project would look like when it comes to fruition and where we currently stand as of today. The businesses and families that have donated along the way, and the it's. I think the emphasis here is it's not just a concession stand for football. This is a project that the idea is the Boosters Club would be running the concessions out of this, and the funds that would be generated by this concession stand would help all sports, be it sports that happen on the stadium field, or baseball, basketball, golf. So, so it's a fledgling group, but it's a project that could use supporters like yourself to help get the word out, and I'm sure that John Malone will continue to come to our meetings until we have the building roofed inside.
So I have a question about this. You've got very nicely identified different, like Great Sharks for $5,000, Mako for $1,000. Are there any tiles or anything that people can buy to?
So that one of the fundraisers that the Boosters group has talked about is to do sort of like one of those little brick projects. And again, I think the timing of it, the brick project might be a great thing to kind of help advance the next project that the group is working on, but or potentially to get all the bathroom stalls done. As John points out, it's there's a lot of interior fixtures. So if you go out there now, not only do you see the physical facade is done, but all of the cast iron plumbing work. So they have it all set to put on these rather expensive wall-mounted toilets. So all that plumbing work is done. It's just now getting to the next place with that. And then just 2 more quick ones. In your packets as well is the budget cycle calendars for both of our towns. I want to emphasize that, that these are your meetings with the select board. Barbara, when the meetings happen, post them on our website, and, so you are always invited. You do not necessarily need to come to any or all of these, but they're, they're not my meeting with the select boards. They're this group's meeting with the select board. So I think Chatham has outlined the dates throughout the calendar year. I think there are some dates in the Harwich one that get fleshed out as the year goes on.
Ms. Stout.
So, I understand that there's back and forth of these, and so there's only guessing how to prepare for that, but anything that that where the finance committee knows that we would be presenting, could that be presented here before it goes there?
I think usually we can. We had, and at the Harwich meeting, I had asked to back it off of, they had a date that was pre-October 1, which would have had us presenting last year's numbers again. The date that they had the meeting was the first business day after October 1, so we presented our October 1 numbers that came here that night. And again, at times it's a little balancing act between trying to be responsive to them and responsive and transparent, and not pushing them off too far on our calendar.
Well, my suggestion would be then to plan our first, our meeting a few days before their meeting. So every time they have a budget meeting, to plan our school committee meeting just before that, or in other words, tell them that we can make the next meeting. They have one every Monday, right? The selectmen do. I'm not sure about the finance committee.
No, I guess what I would emphasize is I'd suggest that the committee would tell the select board that, not the superintendent.
You need to direct that suggestion to me.
I'll be happy to.
Mr. Duval?
I will, in theory, what you're saying is 100%. But as we get closer, and as the state starts giving us numbers, and we have to have a final number to the towns, we can't wait for a school committee meeting to present it here first. As those finite numbers come rolling in, and we have the deadline to give our budget to the town, there are times we can't. And I don't feel it right for us to hold Katie and Scott to a finite, it has to come to us before it goes to the town, because there are times we're not gonna be able to change anything. They're just gonna be telling us what it is.
Presentation of information and acting on information are two separate things. There are gonna be times where the information it's not gonna be possible, as it was with the meeting with the selectmen in Howard, for us to have that information in advance, because it didn't exist until the day of this day or so before the selectmen meeting. But obviously, there's no reason that the superintendent would have any reason not, whenever possible, to present the information to us before the other town boards. That's certainly a goal, but we have to acknowledge that it's not always going to work that way. You also have to respect the other boards and their schedules and their need to accomplish things. I mean, there's a lot, the plate's being balanced here.
I think there's no respect for us as a committee. We had
You think
said
there's no respect? Is that what you're saying?
I think that the school committee's treated, for instance, we always have to go to them. They will not come here. We suggested that before. I don't see any reason, since they meet every Monday, why we couldn't coordinate this. I mean, it's hardly any difference. I don't know about the last minute. If there was really something very last minute that can't be done, then the superintendent or Katie could email that to us so we could have it at least a day or so in advance, or whenever it's available. But this early part, we're turning our information in early a lot of the time. Last year we turned it in early. I think I went to several of those and we were early all the time. So
We had an extremely good relationship with the town of Harwich, for example, last year, as a result of the
Yes.
fact that we produced most of the information they wanted well before they needed it.
yes.
And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that we had a rather smooth budget period last year. Ms. Ryder?
I would just like to second Sharon's request that I think information about the budget should be presented to the school committee, considering that is our direct purview, before it's presented to the towns. In this particular case, there wasn't a big rush that I know of to present that information to them. We're trying to get out in front and present it to them as early as possible, but I don't think it would have been an issue to present it to them, say, this coming week, so that we as a school committee could have seen it first. I understand that there are going to be times when that won't be possible, when, as Stephen says, the numbers are coming in, you know, fast and furious, and we have to be reporting them, and there's a bunch of deadlines. But, you know, it's kind of a matter of respect that it's presented to us first, as a school committee.
I certainly agree that that is a legitimate goal, and there's also a difference between budget information and other information. You know, school enrollment issues has not reached quite the same level as budget information in terms of a priority to make sure it's told to us before. I'm also advised that last year, no presentation of any budget information was provided to either Board of Selectmen before it was presented to us. So for the most important part of our financial obligation, we have a history of always receiving that information before the Selectmen. Mr. Russell?
I think the spirit is valid to think that's going to happen. But of the half a dozen or 8 meetings the last 2 years, I would think the majority of the meetings we did get the information in advance. And I think it's reasonable to expect that when possible, that happens. But there could very well be, especially in the early stages where there's a deadline, and I'm not going to try to evaluate this past 2 weeks meeting, that there are going to be times, that might be once or twice a year, that their information had to be presented. And myself, I felt very confident that in this case, Katie and Scott and the chair would be able to present our information to the respective boards. And as someone said here, there's so many boards involved here. 2 towns, finance coordinates with their Board of Selectmen meetings. We are invited to join them as we did the other night, and the same with Howard. So, you know, I didn't have the same feeling of being left out on the information flow, and I think where possible, it's been happening.
I'd like to move on with the agenda. I think everybody has stated a valid position on this, and obviously we all agree on the goal, and we'll make every effort to be able to do that whenever possible. We do have a couple more action items. Yeah, we did. She talked about the DES review and the IRS review. Did we not discuss the DESE review?
We just quickly mentioned that it's
Okay.
happening.
I want to make sure we do the theater house manager job description and stipend issue on the action item, since I'm assuming that is somewhat important in order to get that going. So, Mr. Carpenter.
So we had discussed in executive session a job description for the theater house manager. This is the individual that would be working for the school district on a stipended basis to help both in-house and rental use of the auditorium. So the person has training and expertise in using the soundboard, light board, and video projection capabilities of the auditorium. You know, the fundamental things that changed in the job description that we discussed was, and these have also been discussed with our union, the MREA, is to extend the responsibilities so it's on a calendar year, not to have it be restricted to a school year. We sort of reordered and emphasized that the role primarily is involved with training students and staff to be able to facilitate, you know, the production, so that the the individual, when we have school plays, would be training students on how to use the light and sound boards, so that we build our capacity, so that it's not just one person that knows how to use the light and sound board, but over the time, many people, and ideally have students trained so much that they then have little side jobs that they can come in here and work to be the ones that are running the light and sound when we have rental opportunities of the auditorium. The other thing that fundamentally changed in the job description / stipend is the stipend was a $3,000 a year stipend and has increased to a $5,000 a year stipend. Amanda Koslowski, who has worked for us in the past as the theater facility house manager, has agreed to join us and be that under this revised job description stipend.
Is there a motion to approve the amendment to for the creation of theater house manager job description and stipend?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is there a handout or something that says all this? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That's a unanimous vote. Thank you. Anything else with regard to the superintendent's report? Mr. Carpenter?
The only other thing I had is just
The answer was no, but
a reminder and invitation that next Tuesday, 4:30, we will have an airing of our CHIPS green high school video that will then start streaming on the education channel. But this would be just sort of a little way to celebrate the green initiatives that were put in place through the design of this building, and it will have some nice cameos from the architects that designed a lot of the green aspects of the building to our project manager, and I'll do a little budget introduction as to what being CHIP certified really is saving our towns. So it's 4:30, Tuesday, October 18th. You're welcome to come, bring popcorn.
I thought food wasn't allowed.
thank you, Mr. Carpenter. We have a couple other agenda items. I want to make sure that we do our last action item. As many of you will recall, and perhaps some people watching on our meeting might recall, we had previously attempted to, in our first meeting, we had attempted to elect a vice chair. We were unable to do so as a result of a tie vote. The previous nominations were for Karen Ryder and Nancy Scott. First, I'd like to ask if either of the previous candidates who've already been nominated want to withdraw their nomination, withdraw their agreement to be nominated. No. Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Oh, I was just going to nominate Karen Ryder.
I think, I was thinking the nominations were made, they were seconded, they were voted on. I think that we just had a tie. I think we can just proceed. Are there any other nominations? Okay, so with the same nominations, please take a card and a pencil.
Is it a number 2 pencil?
I'll pass out the cards and the pencils, and you can take one as needed. Although it doesn't look like there's enough. I don't need one, actually. Absolutely. So while those are being passed out, we'll follow the same procedure we followed the last time, which we will ask each member to indicate on the card their name on the top of the card and the person that they voted for on the bottom of the card. And then we will publicly read the votes. And if you pass the votes forward,
Keep it.
and the pencils. Pencils are expensive. Oh, the pencils. And I'll ask the secretary to, please announce the voter and the person that they're voting for.
Terry Russell for Nancy Scott. It's a 1-point vote. Steve Duvall for Nancy Scott. It's a 0.5 vote. Jackie Zibrat Long for Nancy Scott. It's a 0.5 vote. Karen Ryder for Karen Ryder. 0.5 vote. Donna Richardson for Karen Ryder. It's a 1-point vote. Nancy Scott for Nancy Scott. It's a 0.5 vote. Sharon Stout for Karen Ryder. It's a 1-point vote. Brian Whittigren for Nancy Scott. It's a 1-point vote. 3.5 for Nancy Scott. 2.5 for Karen Ryder.
So that would indicate that the board has chosen Nancy Scott as vice chair for the year. Thank you. Our last item on the agenda, technically under reports and discussions, at the request of Karen, was, and might be on future agendas as well, is the question of future agendas. The agenda's been out for a couple of days. Does anybody have any concerns or questions or suggestions with regard? Some suggestions have already been made during the course of the meeting as to further agenda items. Does anybody have any thoughts on the issue of further agenda items or any requests at this point for items to be put on future agendas? Ms. Ryder?
I think we talked in our workshop, I believe Donna talked about it, about updates on strategic plan periodically, because there are certain milestones in there, and I think we're probably coming up on some of those milestones. Could we have that on the next agenda or the one after that, whatever is appropriate?
Do you remember in particular which strategic items were due to be resolved by now, or is that's the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I don't have it in front of me.
Ms. Richardson?
I'd be willing to go through it and kind of see when things are due or look at.
Okay,
Thank you. That would be great.
that'd be very helpful.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything else anybody wants to discuss on a future agenda? Okay, that would be the last item on our agenda. Is there anybody making a motion to have an executive session?
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Really, 30 seconds.
So moved.
Yeah, we will poll the members with regard to going into executive session. Ms. Richardson?
Yes.
Pardon?
Can we say no?
You can say no. Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Long?
Aye.
Ms. Ryder? Pardon? Yeah, I'm pretty sure Nancy seconded that.
Oh, no, I moved it.
She made the motion. I think Ms. Richardson seconded that motion for to go into executive session. You remember that, don't you?
Read your
did-
spiel.
All right, the meeting, the regular meeting is adjourned. It was a unanimous roll call vote, thank you. The school committee will, the regular session will end. We'll go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining units, non-union contracts, and we will not be coming back into regular session. Thank you.
Go down here. I hope we can't start executive session till these are all signed.
Ah, damn it. I knew I-
Too late.